You forgot one thing, Darren. I don't play for the short term. I play the long game. Folks say marriage is like a deck of cards. In the honeymoon, two hearts and a diamond feel like enough. Years later, you start looking for a club and a spade. Me? I traded the club for cameras and the spade for signed affidavits. Name's Peter Dalton, Pasadena, Texas. I fix machines for a living and protect my house like it's a refinery. 3 months ago, my wife's brother-in-law walked into my kitchen with a smile and a handshake and started treating my mortgage like it had his name on it. By the time my buddies stopped returning calls, people were whispering that I was angry, unstable, jealous. Let them. Because while they shared advice, I collected evidence. If you're wondering how a blue-collar dad turned a family con into federal paperwork, keep watching. The first card I flip doesn't make noise. It makes arrests. My name's Peter Dalton, but folks at the refinery call me Pete. I'm 42, a maintenance supervisor at Bayou Gulf Refining down in Pasadena, Texas. I keep old machines running and younger men honest. Where I work, you don't earn respect with a title on a door. You earn it with burns on your knuckles and problems that stop being problems after your shift. I'm not a philosopher, but I believe a man should fix what he can fix and admit what he can't. That rule works for busted pumps and broken promises. I've been married 18 years, and I used to think marriage was the one machine that didn't need a manual, just attention. Lately, attention hasn't been enough. The bolts holding my life together started to squeal, then grind. If you know that sound, you know what comes next. You shut the line down, or something tears loose. I heard the screech and kept working, until it was too late to pretend. Home's a single-story ranch a few miles from the ship channel. It smells like coffee at 5 and motor oil at 6. My morning ritual's simple. Check the weather, pack a lunch, touch the photo of Riley taped inside my locker before the horn blows. Weekends, I mow in straight lines. Not because grass cares, but because order calms me. My tools hang on a pegboard by size, not price. The kitchen table's scarred from years of homework, birthday candles, and one busted wrench I dropped the night Riley took her first steps. That table knows our family better than we know ourselves. Lately, though, breakfast's been quieter. The chair across from me stays empty a little longer. Messages ping before good morning. A home shows its cracks in silence, gaps in conversation, a cup left to dry on the counter, mail face down. The house is still standing, but the load feels uneven. Houses don't fall in a day. They sag first. Nicole Carter Dalton runs the front desk at a busy dental office in Clear Lake. If you've ever watched a woman juggle 5 ringing phones, 3 schedules, and 2 insurance claims while she's smiling, you've met someone like my wife. She's crisp, punctual, and smart enough to find the missing form before anyone knows it's gone. For years, she bragged that I could fix anything with duct tape and a deadline. We were a team, her lists, my tools. But the last few months, our conversations changed temperature. Same words, colder room. She started comparing people the way you compare refrigerators, energy efficient, stainless steel with ice in the door. Suddenly my reliable became small. My steady became stuck. I don't mind high standards. Machines run better when you spec them right. What I mind is feeling like a project someone else can upgrade. Nicole didn't ask if I wanted a new operating system. She installed one. And I woke up running programs I didn't choose. Riley is 18, all elbows and opinions, headed to San Jacinto College next month. She borrowed my stubbornness and her mother's patience, which means she listens without blinking, then says exactly one sentence that ruins your excuse. When trouble started, she didn't pick sides. She took notes. She'd pat the dog, glance at our faces, and look away, like a referee who knows the next flag will matter. I once told her integrity's what you do when nobody's watching. She told me the real test is what you do when everybody is. The day she asked for my truck keys to pick up study guides, I realized I was measuring time in lasts. Last school night, last dinner before college, last Sunday game. You want to protect your kid from bad weather. Life teaches you to pack her a better raincoat. Riley didn't demand answers. She waited for them. Waiting can be love. It can also be a countdown. Darren Whitfield came into our family through Nicole's sister, Janet. He's a regional director for Tri-Lakes Pharmaceuticals, drives a BMW, flashes a West Chase Country Club badge like it's a passport. He shakes hands the way salesmen do, 2 pumps and a checklist behind his smile. First dinner, he asked about my work like it was a hobby I'd outgrow. Maintenance, he said, as if pronouncing a warning label. I've met men like Darren in break rooms and boardrooms, quick with advice, quicker with your wallet. He's the kind who leans on the word optimize. Where I come from, optimize means try not to break it. Where he comes from, it sounds like make it yours. Nicole liked how he made problems look simple. I watched how he made people look small. Some men test your patience. Others test your foundation. Darren didn't push. He pressed, steady, polite pressure, the kind that moves a picture frame a quarter inch every day until the wall looks crooked. It started faint. Darren says we should refinance. Darren thinks you could save on gas if you trade the truck. Darren knows a counselor at a private college. Riley should aim higher. None of it was illegal. All of it was intrusive. Advice is polite control without the paperwork. I nodded, then checked the math. The numbers didn't justify the moves, not for us. But Darren says became its own spreadsheet. Nicole liked the options. I heard the subtext. Bigger dreams, smaller Pete. I'm not allergic to change. I am allergic to the kind that treats your life like a demo model. Swap this, upgrade that, don't worry who pays. The thing about needles is you hardly feel the first one. By the time you look down, you've got track marks of good intentions. The night I opened the mail and found a glossy brochure for a special rate with a sticky note, "Call Darren," I realized this wasn't talk, it was a plan. We were at Janet's place, plates cleared, coffee poured. Darren tilted his cup toward me and told a story about a factory outage like he'd been there. Then he grinned. "Pete works with his hands," he said to the table. Everyone chuckled, the kind of laugh that lives in the throat. I said honest work, the way I always do. He said sure, like honest was a four-letter word you whisper in church. There's a temperature a man recognizes in a room, the point where respect drops a degree and doesn't come back. I looked at Nicole. She didn't defend me. She corrected my grammar about a sports stat instead. That's when the room changed shape. I wasn't just outvoted. I was outnumbered. Darren's not cruel. He's careful. He shrinks you without leaving fingerprints. When we said goodnight, he shook my hand, eyes smiling over my shoulder. I drove home hearing only the part of his laugh that didn't make sound. Distance doesn't arrive with sirens. It shows up as a new list on the fridge. Different fonts, different owner. Nicole started bringing home phrases like growth mindset and networking dinner, then set them on the counter next to the salt. Small things changed seats. My friends were suddenly rough around the edges. My goals were practical, said like a bruise. I stopped arguing and started listening because a man who spends his days diagnosing vibration learns more by letting the motor run. The rhythm was off. She talked about trips we hadn't priced, schools we hadn't visited, cars that were more us. I wondered who us meant now. When she scrolled through her phone at midnight, I didn't pry. I counted seconds between her sighs. People say marriages end over something big. Sometimes they end over 1,000 small trades, each one fair on paper. Papers don't sleep in your bed. The gap between her pillow and mine could have fit another person. I walked in from a late shift and found Nicole and Darren at our kitchen table, papers spread like a roadmap to a place I never meant to go. Bank statements, mortgage notes, Riley's 529, our private life flattened and itemized under someone else's fingers. Darren didn't look guilty. He looked helpful. "Just walking Nicole through her options," he said. "Her options, not ours." I stood there long enough to hear him say equity twice and opportunity 3 times. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "What are you doing in my house after dark with my money on my table?" He said, "I'm family. Paper doesn't care who touches it. Signatures do." I felt my hands curl and opened them on purpose. There's a difference between losing your temper and using it. I chose neither. I let silence do the work. Silence makes a man repeat himself. Darren started repeating himself. That told me everything I needed to know. I asked them to stop. Not because I was scared of numbers, but because permission still means something where I live. Darren smoothed his tie. "We're just optimizing," he said, as if my marriage were a spreadsheet. "Nicole deserves security." I said, "She has it." He said, "Not with your approach." It's strange how easily some people promote themselves to captain of your ship. Nicole wouldn't meet my eyes. I realized the debate had sailed without me. They were negotiating my future from a dock I didn't recognize. So I called it. "Pack it up," I told him. "Now." He blinked but didn't move. "That temper," he told Nicole, like I was a weather report. I took one step forward, slow enough to be calm, close enough to be clear. He stacked his printouts. Not mine, his. The difference matters. You don't argue with a man in your kitchen who thinks he owns the room. You reset ownership. I did. Some moments are small on paper and huge in your bones. Get out of my house, I said, even. He laughed the kind of laugh men use when they think the ref's on their side. I didn't stop smiling. I just closed the distance between us until his laughter had nowhere to stand. He left with his pages and a promise to call Nicole later when we could be adults. Adults pay their own bills and keep their hands off other people's. After the door shut, the kitchen felt bigger and colder. Nicole's voice was sharp with words that don't pack themselves back in the box. Jealous, insecure, embarrassing. I've lifted steel plates with 3 men and a chain hoist. Those words weighed more. She slept in the guest room that night. So did the problem. You don't win much by throwing someone out. Sometimes you just finally hear your own feet on the floor. Mine sounded steady. I decided to keep them that way. Words don't evaporate, they settle like dust you keep seeing in the morning sun. Nicole moved into the guest room for 3 nights. We linked only by text. Groceries, schedule, Riley has practice. When you've lived with someone that long, silence is its own language. It tells you what's over and what you're too proud to admit. I started choosing chores that made noise, vacuum, shop vac in the garage, anything louder than my thoughts. I kept thinking about the look on Darren's face in my kitchen. Not guilty, not scared, entitled. He was comfortable in my chair. That stuck. I could survive a cold bed for a week. I couldn't stand the idea of another man mapping my house in his head. I decided I'd rather be called stubborn than be called victim. That choice sounds noble. It isn't. It's just a line you draw so you remember which side to stand on when the next wave hits. Friday at Murphy's Tavern, same booth, same Budweiser. Ray Kowalski, my best friend since we were dumb enough to think we were smart, stirred his beer like it needed help. You should apologize to Darren, he said. I almost laughed. For what? For making family feel unwelcome. I asked when Darren became his family. Ray shifted. Turns out Darren had a job for him. Good pay, steady hours, something in Westchase. That's when I saw the angle. It's easy to buy a man who's tired of worrying about overtime. Ray's not a bad guy, he's a tired one. He's trying to help, Ray said. Help who? I asked. He didn't answer. When your friend starts using another man's talking points, you're not losing an argument. You're losing a witness. I left cash on the table and walked out. The door chime sounded like a coin dropping into someone else's pocket. The next week, Mike Torres, a UPS driver who's helped me move 3 couches and 1 dumb treadmill, ducked a conversation in the spice aisle at H-E-B. Nicole's worried about you, he said finally, eyes on the cumin. She thinks you're paranoid. Then Jim Bradley, my neighbor, a firefighter, told me his wife got a call about my erratic behavior. You can fight rumors, but you can't outwork them. They run hot and fast, fueled by concern and flavored with judgment. Each man had his reason. New job, new schedule, new story to tell at dinner. It all sounded so reasonable I almost believed it myself. That's the trick with a good con. It leaves just enough truth on the surface to keep your hands off the bottom. I walked out with coffee and a receipt and the feeling that my life had been rebranded without my consent. When people stop asking you what happened and start telling you, you've already lost the room. On paper, the narrative was tidy. Successful brother-in-law offers guidance. Proud blue-collar husband overreacts. Wife seeks support. Friends rally. No villains, just a misunderstanding with nice hair. You can't beat a story like that by yelling. You beat it by flipping it over and showing the nails holding it together. I could see where this was headed. 100 small kindnesses turning into signatures, and signatures turning into leverage I'd never agreed to. I kept replaying Darren's favorite word, optimize. There are 2 kinds of optimization, one that saves you money and one that costs you your name. Men my age learned this late. Not every problem is a punch, some are a puzzle. I stopped shadowboxing and started counting pieces. The more I counted, the more I realized this wasn't about being right in a room. It was about being ready in a courtroom. If the game was going long, I'd need a different playbook. Backyard BBQ, brisket resting under foil, neighborhood kids tossing a football too close to my truck. I heard Nicole telling a circle of friends I was going through a midlife crisis. Angry, suspicious, maybe I should talk to someone. I turned off the grill. The hiss felt like a valve closing in my chest. People went quiet the way people do when they're caught living your life without you. I walked over, smiling because a smile disarms folks faster than a speech. "Y'all having a good time?" Heads bobbed. I thanked Ray and Mike for coming and, in the same breath, wished them a safe drive home. A silence pulled tight across the yard. Riley stared at the foil, then at me, like she was learning a new word for father. You can lose a fight in front of strangers and never get it back. I chose not to fight. I chose a different battlefield. I didn't raise my voice or list my grievances. I simply reduced the audience. When people left, the air thinned out. That's when you feel what's real. Nicole was furious. Riley was embarrassed. I was steady. It's hard explaining to a crowd why you won't keep playing a rigged game. It's easier to fold your cards and start a new table. After the last car pulled away, I stood in the backyard and listened to the cicadas, that steady Texas buzz that sounds like held breath. Some choices don't win applause. They create room. I needed a room no one else set the rules for. The party wasn't a disaster, it was a measurement. Now I knew exactly how much space I had to work with, and who'd crowd it out if I let them. I cleaned the grill alone, which is how I prefer to sharpen knives. Alone is where a plan can finally hear itself think. That night, I sat at the kitchen table that had betrayed us and took inventory. Not dollars, damage. Marriage, hairline cracks running long ways. Friends, listed as assets, now liabilities. Reputation, marked unstable in a neighborhood that loves stable lawns. I wrote 3 columns: what I know, what I can prove, what I can't risk. That third column mattered most. You can lose money and make it back. Lose your name, and the bank won't recognize your face. I pictured Darren placing people like furniture, one chair closer to the checkbook, one chair farther from me. I pictured Nicole signing, not out of malice, but momentum. Momentum moves more families than malice ever will. I stared at the table until the wood grain looked like topographic lines. Then I circled a sentence. I won't win this loud. I don't need more volume. I need better evidence. That's not surrender. That's aim. I wrote it on a yellow sticky and pressed it to the fridge. Document, bait, trap. Document means cameras where the law welcomes them. Time-stamped notes. Copies of every form Darren breathes on. Bait means information that looks rich and tastes real, but won't poison me if he swallows it. Trap means legal, clean, and patient. Something that closes by itself once the wrong man steps inside. I've fixed machines that could kill you if you rushed them. This felt the same. No heroics, no speeches, just process. I apologized to Nicole in the morning for my overreaction. I told her Darren might be right about a few things. I let her feel safe. I let him feel superior. Men like Darren don't notice the hook if you compliment the bait. By lunch, the house was quiet again. By dinner, I had a plan. By bedtime, I slept. When a man finally chooses his method, sleep returns. Morning would be for the first screw turned. I started where most men my age start, by writing things down. I installed security cameras where the law likes them. Porch, foyer, kitchen, garage. I kept a pocket notebook in my shirt and a bigger one in the nightstand. Every call got a time, date, and 2 words about tone. I scanned anything with a signature and saved it to 2 drives. One in the safe, one in Riley's old shoebox marked Science Fair. It felt boring, which is how solid plans often feel at first. A man who fixes pumps learns to trust routine, check pressure, listen for whine, log the numbers. Paper beats memory, video beats denial. I wasn't building a story for sympathy. I was building one that could stand up without me in the room. When the cameras clicked on and the red dots glowed, the house felt different. Less like a place you can talk your way through, more like a place that remembers. That's when I felt ready. The internet leaves breadcrumbs for men who carry a flashlight. I started with Harris County Public Records. Title histories, liens, and quick claims tell you how tidy a man is when nobody's watching. Then I searched social media and LinkedIn, not because I love scrolling, but because patterns love to hide in pride. Darren's posts looked curated: golf, charity, industry panels. Nothing wrong with that. But the comments told a second story, names that repeated, job titles that moved in suspicious lockstep, relatives thanking him for financial guidance. I pulled threads and found addresses linked to those names, then looked for court filings that lined up with the dates. It wasn't a smoking gun, it was a row of warm barrels. Older folks say, if you want to know a man, see who invites him back. Darren got invited back to people's wallets. That's a friendship with a timer. When the timeline started lining up, I underlined one word in my notebook: pattern. On paper, Darren's career climbed like a perfect set of stairs. 4 companies in 6 years, each switch a bump in title and money. If you're young, that looks ambitious. If you're my age, it looks like a man outrunning feedback. I pulled the dates and added the news headlines next to each jump. Small product launch here, restructure there, one change in leadership direction. That usually means someone lost patience. I asked myself a question I use at the plant. If this machine's so reliable, why does it keep getting replaced? Promotions should land you in rooms where the floors don't shift. Darren kept moving rooms. There's a difference between climbing and repainting ladders. I circled the shortest gap, 5 months between gigs, and wrote, why the hurry? Men don't move that fast unless something's chasing them or something's broken behind them. Either way, you don't want that man fixing your house. You want him far from your breaker panel. Wealth has a sound to it, quiet. Darren's life was louder than it needed to be. River Oaks condo at 95% mortgage, BMW on a lease, country club covered by a company package. That's not evil, it's a costume. My dad used to say the best-dressed men he knew wore steel-toed boots 5 days a week and good socks on Sunday. I'm not against nice things, I'm against nice things owning you. The numbers told me Darren's lifestyle needed fresh cash every month to avoid squeaks. So where do men with squeaky budgets look? They look for relatives or in-laws with equity, savings, and the kind of pride that loves being optimized. I wrote 3 lines on a page: image, debt, access. If a man scores high on the first 2, he'll chase the third like oxygen. Now I knew what Darren wanted. Not my advice, not my friendship, not my respect. He wanted my door unlocked. Veterans of life spot parasites the way mechanics spot leaks. Not by the puddle, but by the drip trail. I found 3 families in 3 cities with the same outline: Toledo, Columbus, Cincinnati. Brother-in-law or close friend becomes financial advisor, gains power of attorney on one account, suggests temporary beneficiary changes on another. Nothing illegal in the phrasing, everything risky in the rhythm. Then come unfortunate market turns, unexpected fees, and short-term loans to stabilize the situation. By the time the smoke clears, there's less in the pot and more names on the mail. Lawsuits whispered, settlements hidden, Thanksgivings canceled. The saddest line I read was a text from one husband. I was trying to be a team player. That line stuck under my ribs. Team players give trust by the gallon and get accountability by the teaspoon. I wrote one more word on my pad: host. If Darren needed a new one, he was already in my kitchen. I replayed that night at the table the way a foreman replays an accident. Not just the bank statements, the beneficiary change forms, the POA drafts, the loan applications printed with cheerful logos and small print that bites. I pictured Nicole nodding at sentences she didn't write and Darren pointing with the pen he brought. Words like temporary and routine do most of the damage in families. They make permanent things sound gentle. I remembered the way Darren said equity, like he'd discovered it, and how he said security, like I was the problem with it. You can't argue with a man who weaponizes comfort. You can, however, take apart the comfort and show the screws. I laid the forms out again and circled where a signature hands your future to someone else. Then I drew a box around the whole pile and wrote, "Not yours." That box wasn't for him, it was for me, to keep my hand off the pen. I'm no lawyer, but I know railings keep you on the stairs. I called a CPA we've used for years and a modest attorney who doesn't own a billboard. We set fraud alerts, account freezes, and revoked anything that gave someone else a key to my lock. We established backups, passwords that mean something to me, but nothing to anyone who hasn't replaced a pump at 3 a.m. We checked beneficiaries, mirrored documents, and set it so any routine change sent a flare to my phone. People think protection is a fortress. It's really a fence with good hinges. Nicole didn't love the meetings. She said I was making a big deal out of help. I didn't argue. I signed what I needed to sign. Quietly, cleanly, with a witness. The papers didn't make me feel safe. They made me feel prepared. Safety is a feeling. Preparation is a plan. The difference matters when someone starts calling your future an option. If you've raised teenagers or trained new techs, you know the power of a pause. I apologized to Nicole for overreacting. I told her I might have been too proud about money and that maybe we should hear Darren out on a trial basis. She relaxed like someone put a warm towel on a sprain. She wanted peace. So did I. But peace without boundaries is just quiet before a louder storm. I poured her a coffee, asked her what goals mattered to her, and nodded. Not fake nods. Real ones. You can love someone and still disagree with their map. I said yes to a dinner with Darren. I practiced saying good point and let me think on that. You can call it acting. I call it steering a heavy load around a blind curve. You don't jerk the wheel, you lean into it. When Nicole texted Janet that I was coming around, I wrote 2 words in my book. Good, now. Bait isn't a lie, it's a mirror angled so a man sees what he wants first. I gave Darren numbers that lived near the truth but didn't guard it, balances that were close enough to be credible, income rounded the way folks round when pride does the math, a debt-to-income figure that would make a banker nod at a distance. None of it would sink us if it wandered into a form. All of it would tag anyone who carried it forward without checking. Think of it as carving initials into your tools. If they go missing and show up at a pawn shop, you know they're yours. I wasn't trying to trap Nicole, I was trying to make sure the next person who touched our money left fingerprints. When Darren said, "Let me take this off your plate," I said, "I appreciate that." What I appreciated was gravity. If he carried my numbers wrong, the fall wouldn't break me. It would mark him. We had stake in the kind of red wine that tries too hard. Darren toasted family and fresh starts. He told me there's no shame in accepting help. I said, "None at all," and smiled like a man who finally figured out Bluetooth. He explained optimized refinancing the way I explain torque to new hires. Slow, patient, full of examples. I nodded where appropriate. The trick with men like Darren is they don't know the difference between agreement and attention. I gave him attention. He poured himself into it. He promised introductions, better rates, a college whisperer for Riley. Nicole's shoulders dropped. She needed to see me seated at that table without my fists clenched. I kept my hands flat on the wood. If you've ever let a bully think he's winning to make him overreach, you know the satisfaction that feels like calm. Driving home, he slapped my shoulder at the door. "We're going to make this easy." I thought, for who? Trust speeds up pens. Nicole signed follow-ups with a relief that broke my heart. Short forms, just acknowledgments, and temporary permissions like beneficiary tweaks and POA previews. None of them stuck because the real document sat behind them, fresh, dated earlier, and crafted to avoid anything that tried to rewrite our house in new ink. I had already signed those with our CPA and attorney looking on. Watching Nicole sign Darren's stack felt like watching someone open an umbrella indoors. Nothing bad happens in the moment, but you feel the superstition. I didn't scold her. I asked if she wanted tea. A man can be right and still be gentle. She believed she was helping us grow. I believed I was keeping us from shrinking. When she placed the pen down and looked lighter, I realized how heavy fear is, especially the fear of being left behind. I took her cup to the sink and told myself the worst thing to be left behind is yourself. Word got out that Pete was softening. So Ray, Mike, and Jim reappeared, full of the kind of concern that sounds like a meeting agenda. Nicole suggested we all talk together, clear the air, maybe find a plan we could all get behind. I said yes and set the living room the way I set a job site. 3 chairs facing mine, coasters on the table, water bottles lined up, cameras visible but not glaring. When men see order, they behave better. I wanted better. I needed witnesses who didn't feel tricked. I practiced a sentence in the mirror. Let me show you what's true. Not louder, clearer. The date got fixed for Saturday. The tone was intervention, the vibe, dad's the problem, and the outcome undecided. I wasn't nervous. I've held a broken flange at arm's length while someone shut the valve. This felt like that. Heavy, hot, but manageable if nobody panicked. I went to bed early and slept like a man who labeled his tools. There were a dozen times I wanted to blow the whistle early, drop the folders on the table and say, "Here's your saint." But patience is a wrench you learn late in life. I kept repeating, "Don't punch, pull thread." Punching feels great for 3 seconds and ruins your aim for 3 months. Threads, when you pull them steady, unravel whole sweaters. I kept my voice low, my answers shorter than my questions, and my texts plain. Older viewers know that tone, the one you use when your kid swears the check's in the mail. You don't yell. You ask for the routing number. Each day I didn't snap, Darren relaxed another degree. Each degree he relaxed, he reached farther. Reaching men exposed themselves, emails forwarded, forms pre-filled, calls made on speaker. Every reach was a future sentence in a paragraph I could read out loud. The closer the meeting got, the steadier my pulse went. Calm is a weapon if you sharpen it. I built folder A like a bridge inspection report. First tab, career timeline with gaps circled in red. Second, credit pulls that suggested a man living wide, not deep. Third, notes from families who'd lost more than money. Holidays, reputations, the right to say we. I didn't collect their pain to wave it around. I collected it so nobody could say I imagined this. Photos of addresses, printouts of advisor emails, even a screenshot of a text that said, "We'll move quickly, you're in good hands." The phrase "good hands" reads different when your wallet is lighter. I kept the tone clinical, not bitter. Bitter loses juries. Clinical wins Tuesdays. At the back, I added a 1-page summary. Method, access, exit. If Darren ever sat where I sat, he'd recognize the engineering. Repeatable process, predictable results. That's the thing about men who think they're special. They forget their signatures look the same every time. Folder B was harder. It held every beneficiary change, POA draft, and loan app Nicole touched while believing she was helping. On each form, I clipped the corresponding void paperwork I'd filed the day before. Quiet protections that made the later signatures bounce. I color-coded the timeline so even a tired man could read it. Green for safeguards, yellow for Darren's pushes, red for moments that could have sunk us if I'd been slower. I added a gentle note on the first page. This is not to shame you. The goal wasn't to win an argument, it was to save a house. Sentences like that save dinners later. I imagined my audience, men and women who've signed something after a long day because the person beside them said, "It's routine." I wanted them to feel seen, not stupid. When I snapped the folder shut, it felt like buckling a seatbelt. You don't do it because you expect a crash. You do it because roads are roads. Before the meeting, I practiced breathing like I was about to lift a transmission. Inhale through the nose, exhale slow, let the body remember it's built for weight. I promised myself I wouldn't talk above a calm conversation in a quiet kitchen. 60 decibels, easy does it. People remember tone longer than words. I wrote 3 phrases on an index card. Here's what's true. You can read this. I'll wait. Then I made coffee, set the table, and told the cameras to blink their little red reassurance. You can handle pressure 2 ways. Turn the valve fast and hope the seal holds, or keep your hand steady and let the system settle. Older folks know the second way saves more lives. By the time the doorbell rang, my pulse had dropped from drumline to metronome. I wanted my voice to be the first sign that the story was changing. Bad actors get louder. Men with evidence get quiet. Saturday arrived bright and hot, like most truths in Texas. Ray, Mike, and Jim filed in, eyes soft with concern the way men look before they tell you to get help. Nicole hovered, grateful and tense. We sat. I let them go first. They talked about stress, work pressure, money worries, Riley leaving for college, all logged in my notebook already, but I listened fresh. When they finished, I nodded and reached for folder A. Before you diagnose, I said, read. Men my age prefer facts to speeches when facts exist. I slid the pages across, no flourish. The room made that small adjustment sound, chairs creaking, throats clearing, as people moved from opinions to paperwork. I didn't add commentary. I let ink do the talking. That was the moment I'd been building toward. The first time my friends met the version of Darren that didn't fit into a compliment. They leaned in. So did I. I asked one question, easy as passing salt. Who told you we're broke? Nobody answered right away. Ray glanced at Nicole. Mike studied a water ring. Jim adjusted his cap. That's when I placed a short list on the table. Our mortgage at 60%, $43,000 in savings, $529 fully funded, 0 credit card debt, 2 paid-off cars. No brag, just reality. If someone told you different, I said, They were wrong or selling something. The word selling landed like a tool dropping on concrete. We've all bought a shiny fix that didn't fix anything. Ray's face tightened, like he heard the click of a trap he'd stepped over. My hands stayed flat. We can talk feelings after facts, I said. Feelings flinch. Facts hold still. I pointed to a date on Darren's timeline that lined up with his job offer to Ray. The room shifted a degree. 1 degree is all you need when you're turning a stuck bolt. I walked them through the figures the way a coach walks a team through last Friday's film. Slow, simple, honest. Mortgage principal, savings account, Riley's education fund, retirement pots. Nothing fancy. Just numbers that don't blink when you stare back. Silence followed, not awkward, absorbing. Men who work with their hands know this quiet. It's the sound a machine makes when the problem wasn't the machine. Nicole looked at the pages, then at me. I didn't know the totals, she said. That sentence hurt and helped at once. I nodded. That's why we read them together. You can't blame someone for not seeing a dashboard they never sit behind. You can blame whoever yanked the wheel. I slid a fresh page forward. Beneficiary changes, dates, and the word void stamped clear. Eyes widened, not because the forms existed, but because they were already neutralized. The story was changing shape. Papers prove it faster than speeches do. I asked the question a friend asks when it costs him something. What did Darren promise you? Ray swallowed. Mike exhaled. Jim stared at his boots. Promises are the currency men spend when they're short on proof. Ray muttered about a facility job in Westchase. Steady hours. Mike mentioned better rates, a refinance group buy for the neighborhood. Jim said Darren knew someone who could shave points off insurance. None of it was illegal. All of it felt prepackaged. I didn't shame them. Good men grab easy handles when their backs ache. I simply pointed to the timeline where each promise landed. Right after the kitchen incident. Right before the intervention. That's not support. That's strategy. The room adjusted again. When grown men feel a bruise forming, they stop pretending they didn't bump the table. I get it, I said. I want easy too. Then I turned folder A to the tab labeled Method. But this is not easy. It's extraction. I laid out the 3 families. Hendersons, Martins, Washingtons. No gore, just sequence. Access earned through kindness. Signatures gathered through urgency. Exits masked by respectable words. I pointed to recurring phrases in emails. Temporary. Bridge. We'll move quickly. Same sentences. New city. Darren didn't steal like a thief in a movie. He harvested like a man in a crisp shirt, paperwork, smiles, and timing. That's how real losses happen. They arrive with thank you notes. Ray rubbed his jaw. Mike said, "Man." Jim whispered something that sounded like a prayer. I didn't ask for apologies. I asked for attention. We can still choose what kind of men we are in this room, I said. Witnesses or accomplices. The word accomplices tasted like rust. No one wanted it. I watched them choose. Shoulders squared, eyes lifted. Friends came back into their faces. That's when the entryway floor creaked. 2 silhouettes paused at the hall. Nicole and Darren. On time. They stood where the camera could see them. I didn't invite them in. I just raised folder B. Since we're all here, I said. Nicole's eyes searched mine for an old version of me. I kept the new one steady. I laid the beneficiary forms beside the POA drafts and loan applications, then clipped each to the void doc dated the day before she signed. Routine paperwork, I said softly. The routine you didn't know about is the one that protects us. Darren's smile thinned. He stepped forward like he owned the carpet. You've misunderstood everything, he announced. Men who love control prefer lines to paragraphs. I handed Ray the stack. Read it out loud. He did. The kitchen clock ticked through each sentence. Nicole's hand found the back of a chair. Darren's gaze drifted toward the door. Access, signatures, exit. The rhythm doesn't lie. When Ray reached the word void for the 3rd time, he looked up different. I turned the next page. These forms looked helpful, I said. They were, to someone else. Then I tapped the stamps. Voided, revoked, frozen. Each one a railing I'd put in place before the fall. You watched me sign those, Darren said to Nicole, trying to rebuild yesterday in a new light. I watched you watch her, I replied. There's a difference. People think protection is drama. Most days it's dates and signatures you barely remember. I pointed to one line she'd initialed at our CPA's office, language that unchecked any box checked later without both spouses present. It's a dull sentence that stops sharp knives. Darren's jaw set. He could feel his fingers slipping off our doorknob. "You've been lied to," he told my friends. Ray held up the paper and shook his head. "We're reading." Darren prefers rooms where reading is optional. Tonight it wasn't. Paper doesn't shout, it simply refuses to move. I kept my voice low. "Darren, the figures you've been using aren't our actuals. They're decoys, close enough to invite confidence, false enough to tag any application you pushed forward." He scoffed. "You can't prove intent." I nodded at the camera. "Intent leaves footprints when it repeats." I turned to my friends. "Submitting loan applications with knowingly inaccurate data, income, balances, DTI, is not help. It's a federal problem. Every conversation is recorded, every form is copied. If you want to help my family, stop talking and start listening." You can feel electricity leave a room. It went out of Darren's shoulders first. He looked smaller, not because I was bigger, but because the story couldn't hold him at its center anymore. Nicole's breathing quickened. I wished this had been a different lesson for both of us, but lessons pick their days. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a name I'd saved weeks ago, Detective Sarah Martinez. "Detective Martinez," I said, "Harris County, financial crimes. She's heard enough to care." I didn't raise my voice for effect. I simply tapped a folder labeled audio and another labeled docs. "If I go down telling the truth," I added, and watched Darren flinch at the word truth the way a man flinches at a live wire. I wasn't bluffing. A federal agent doesn't show up like a TV show, but they listen when the pieces fit. "We can leave lawyers out of this if we resolve it now," Darren tried. He still believed in rooms he could control. "Rooms with cameras don't belong to you," I said. Ray stepped closer to the door without looking like he did. Mike slid his phone out to the edge of the table. Jim stood a little taller. Men returned to themselves in inches. This room was done with whispering. The next sound we waited for was a knock. It happened fast, the way bad choices do. Darren lunged across my living room, fists first, words after. I stepped to the side like a man avoiding a rolling toolbox. He hit the bookshelf, not me. Paperbacks flew, a framed Little League photo of Riley cracked, and the camera blinked its quiet red truth. Nicole screamed my name like we were still on the same team. I didn't charge, didn't crow, didn't flinch. I pointed to the lens. Some nights a man learns the value of standing still. I've spent decades fixing problems that weigh more than men. You don't win by being faster, you win by being steadier. Darren kept cursing, trying to turn noise into narrative. Noise doesn't stand up in court. Footage does. When he finally saw the camera, his posture changed by inches. That's when I knew the fight was over. Not because he stopped swinging, but because the story had found its spine. Ray moved to the door without making a scene. Men our age know how to fill a doorway like a bookcase. Solid, quiet, immovable. Mike dialed 911, voice calm, details clean, no heroics. Jim pulled out a chair and guided Nicole down, speaking the way firefighters speak when the room's hot, but the exit's clear. The house felt different, like order had reported for duty. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my open hands, palms visible to the camera and to my friends. A lot of older folks watching this have stood where I stood, right on the edge between proving a point and losing it. That edge is slippery. I kept my boots on the dry side. Darren paced, tested Ray's shoulder like a bad hinge, and found it wouldn't give. That's the thing about real friends. They don't always agree with you, but when the wind picks up, they remember which way the door swings. The patrol car rolled up fast, lights washing our drapes in red and blue that didn't feel triumphant, just official. Detective Sarah Martinez stepped in with a uniformed officer, eyes taking the room's measurements the way proctors do before a test. I didn't make a speech. I handed her folder A, then folder B, then slid a thumb drive across the table like a man sliding a bill at a diner. "Hard copies match the digital," I said. She nodded once and asked 3 questions whose answers fit on a postcard. Who, when, where. I kept it simple. Men who've lived long enough to lose a little know this. The truth doesn't need decoration. It needs sequence. Nicole watched Martinez read, her breathing hitching at each void stamp. Darren spoke up too late and too loud. Men who loved control never timed their pleas right. Martinez didn't look at him first. She looked at the paper. Then she looked at the camera. "Mr. Dalton," Martinez said, "we've had eyes on Mr. Whitfield since the Henderson complaint up in Ohio." She ran a finger down my timeline like she was tracing a map she already knew by heart. "What you've provided fills gaps we couldn't close, dates, signatures, the decision points." I felt something I didn't expect, relief that didn't taste like winning, just like breathing. Ray leaned back, Mike exhaled, Jim folded his arms. Nicole whispered, "You were already investigating him?" Martinez nodded. "Fraud isn't a sprint, it's a route." Older viewers know that word, route, because life, like football, rewards the ones who run their lines without looking at the crowd. Darren tried to object. "This is family business." Martinez didn't blink. "It was, until you put it on paper." You could feel the room tilt, respect sliding toward what was true. I didn't look at Darren. I looked at the photo of Riley and thought, keep your head. When the cuffs clicked, it didn't feel like a movie. It felt like a leak finally sealed. No cheer, no gloat, just the hiss stopping. Darren twisted toward me, cheeks bright with a different kind of heat. "This isn't over," he spat, like he was bargaining with the air. "Yeah," I said, quieter than he deserved. "It is. I wasn't trying to win a line. I was ending a chapter." Martinez read the rights with the rhythm of someone who'd read them to better men and worse. Ray stepped aside as they led Darren past the camera. Mike watched the hall. Jim squeezed Nicole's shoulder and gave her a look that said the next part would be hard in a different way. The door shut behind them. The house changed temperatures again. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold, it was honest. Sometimes honest is the only climate you can live in after a long storm. After everyone leaves, battlefields talk. The bookshelf leaned. The photo lay face down. The living room smelled like coffee and adrenaline. I stood in the center and felt, not joy, something emptier and more familiar, like the feeling after a double shift when the plant finally hums right and you're too tired to celebrate. Folks my age will get this. Victory doesn't always ring a bell. Sometimes it just returns your heartbeat. Nicole wiped her eyes and stared at the door, then at the forms Ray had stacked neatly. I wanted to say something wise. I didn't. Wisdom's quiet. I picked up the photo of Riley, straightened the cracked frame, and set it back on the shelf. The room settled by inches. The camera's red dot went from urgent to ordinary. When I finally sat, the cushion held me like a friend who doesn't ask questions yet. There'd be plenty of questions tomorrow. Tonight could hold silence. "You manipulated me," Nicole said, voice raw. I let the words land. Older couples know this part. The second argument, the one that shows up after the sirens. "I protected the house," I answered, "from burning down with both of us inside." She looked at the void stamps as if they'd been branded on her. "You made me sign things without telling me." I shook my head. "I asked you to sign safeguards before he asked you to sign risks." Words are tricky. They can braid together until nobody knows who knotted them. I kept untangling. "I didn't trust his process," I said. "I wanted ours to survive it." She stared at the floor. "Somewhere between love and pride, there's a bruise that takes longer to fade. I didn't press for forgiveness. You can't pull a splinter out by yanking your own finger." I stood, poured her water, and set it down. "We can fight later," I said. "Tonight, just breathe." I listed facts, plain as inventory. "You believed a man we barely knew. You signed forms you didn't read. You told our friends I was unstable." Then I added the part that matters. I stayed quiet. I prepared. I wasn't performing. I was answering the question marriages ask at their lowest. Who are we when we're not at our best? She swallowed. "I wanted better," she said. "So did I replied. "I just didn't want his version of it." If you've ever stood in a garage staring at a car that won't start, you know the feeling. Is it the battery or is it the engine? A battery you can swap. An engine you rebuild or you don't. We had an engine problem. I told Nicole I'd always wish we hadn't. She nodded without agreement. Not every truth heals. Some just stop a wound from getting deeper. We turned off the lights and let the dark do what daylight can't. Pause. Riley came home to the aftermath. An askew shelf, scuffed floor, the kind of quiet that makes teenagers tiptoe. She looked from me to Nicole to the empty doorway and guessed right. "You finally handled it?" she asked. I said, "The FBI handled it." I opened the door. She smiled my smile, small and lopsided. "Good division of labor." We sat at the table that had betrayed us and ate leftover brisket, cold. Kids see clearer than we think. They just don't always announce it. Riley didn't gloat. She asked if I was okay, then asked if Mom was okay. I said yes and no, in both directions. She nodded like someone checking a torque spec. "You taught me to listen for the click," she said. "When something's tight enough." I told her I was still listening. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Sometimes love is a shove that doesn't move you, just reminds you that you're not alone. By morning, the story had a headline: Gulf Coast Pharma exec arrested in multi-county fraud scheme. Local anchors said his name the way people say names they used to trust. A neighbor texted a link with a single word: "Wow." Ray forwarded a clip and added, "Beers on me." Mike sent a thumbs up, which, from Mike, is poetry. Jim asked if I needed help fixing the shelf. The house filled with small apologies no one spelled out. That's how most grown-ups say sorry, through favors, not speeches. Nicole watched the footage with her hands around a mug she didn't drink. "They used his corporate headshot," she whispered, as if the smile in the photo still had power. "Smiles travel," I said. "So do charges." I wasn't giddy. Headlines fade. Court dates don't. But if you've ever waited months for the other shoe to drop, you know the relief when it finally hits the floor you own. The weeks that followed were paperwork and waiting rooms. Plea deal, 7 years. More families called the hotline once his face hit the 6 o'clock news. The pattern I'd sketched in pencil got inked in 4 states. A prosecutor thanked me for preserving the chain, which is a fancy way of saying I didn't panic and I kept receipts. Older folks understand that kind of praise. It isn't flashy. It's the quiet nod you get after a long job done right. I gave statements. Nicole gave hers. We didn't sit together. We did, however, leave the building through the same door. Small mercies count when the bigger ones are off the table. I slept better, not because the world had become safe, but because I remembered how to lock it. Fraud doesn't disappear. It looks for new hosts. But so does wisdom. If you guard it, it starts guarding you back. That felt like a fair trade. Nicole filed. I didn't contest. After 18 years, some papers read like a weather report. Unhappy, partly honest, chance of starting over. We split assets like 2 people who could still do math. Riley stayed with me because school and life fit better that way, and because teenagers vote with their feet. The house got quieter in a way that didn't hurt. I fixed the shelf, not because furniture matters, but because finishing one repair teaches your hands to trust you again. Nicole and I talked when we had to, kindly, briefly, with the respect you give to someone who once held your whole history. If you've ever held a box of old photos, you know the feeling. Not regret exactly, not nostalgia either, something steadier. We chose civility. It's underrated. Anger burns hot and fast. Civility warms a room you still have to share on holidays. I circled a new word in my notebook. Afterward. Life found a pace that didn't limp. Riley took the truck on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I cooked breakfast. She did dinner. We split dishes like a team that understood the value of ending the day with a clean sink. On Saturdays, we watched the Texans let us down and the Astros pick us up. Little routines built new scaffolding. Trash out by 7, oil change on the 15th, call your grandma on Sundays. Riley joked that I'd beaten Darren with patience and a community college education. I told her I'd had help, from a shoebox labeled Science Fair and a camera with a tiny red light. She said I should put that on a t-shirt. I said I'd rather put it in her head. Older viewers know you don't pass wisdom down by lecture. You pass it by dinners, by rides, by showing up. The house didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a family again, even if smaller. Evenings, I sat on the back steps and watched the flare stacks wink in the distance like stubborn stars. The ship channel hummed the way it always has. Steel, tide, and work you can point at when the day's done. I held a cold beer the way a man holds a memory he earned. Nicole was starting a new life somewhere across town. Darren was learning what time feels like when you can't spend it the way you want. Ray, Mike, and Jim were back to texting about busted water heaters and who's bringing the charcoal. As for me, I didn't feel heroic. I felt intact. Older folks will nod at that word. Intact beats victorious when the crowd goes home. Integrity doesn't clap or shine. It sits beside you and keeps you company. The plan I wrote on a yellow sticky, document, bait, trap, had done its job. The only thing left was to keep living like a man who means it. Here's my payoff. Integrity beats revenge. I called it the long game, but it wasn't about outsmarting a slick man. It was about outlasting a bad story. The deck of cards joke? 2 hearts and a diamond still matter. I stopped swinging the club and started signing the affidavits. When the cameras blinked red and the paper held, I learned the simplest truth a grown man can learn. You don't have to get even to get free. You stand still in the storm and let the facts do the shouting. Darren guessed a Texas family wouldn't notice the hands in our pockets. He guessed wrong. I guessed I needed a crowd to prove I wasn't crazy. I guessed wrong too. What I needed was backbone and a daughter who could spot character from a mile out. Riley saw it. The plan on my fridge, document, bait, trap, wasn't about him. It was about us. We kept the house. We kept our name,